Medical Major Leming Quan stared out the viewport of the interplanetary medical station. The red sands of Arcanus stretched endlessly below, whipped into fantastic shapes by the planet's notorious dust storms. The year 2378 had brought humanity to the stars, but it had also brought war, refugees, and 1,000 new ways to die. As the station's chief trauma surgeon, Quan had seen more than his share of all three. Major Le, the refugees from the Proxima skirmish will arrive in 30 minutes. The voice belonged to Dr. Maya Truong, his colleague, and the only other human physician on the station. Her face appeared tired in the reflection of the viewport. Dark circles under her eyes, evidence of the 18-hour shift they'd both endured. "I'll be ready," Quan replied, not turning from the view. "Casualties?" 27 critical. Mixed species. The Arcturus freighter took heavy fire while evacuating civilians. Quan nodded. It was always the same story. Innocents caught in crossfire between the Galactic Union forces and separatist factions. He'd patched up soldiers and civilians alike, never discriminating between species or allegiances. A doctor's oath transcended planetary boundaries. "I've prepped Operating Bay 3, Maya continued. "And, Quan, Dr. Saralia has requested to assist." At this, Quan turned. "The xenobiologist? This isn't a research opportunity. These are war casualties." "She's also the only physician on board with experience treating 4 of the refugee species," Maya countered. "The Union Medical Council approved her request." Quan suppressed his irritation. Saralia belonged to the Syrian species, tall, ethereal beings with translucent skin that revealed the complex network of bioluminescent circulatory systems beneath. Brilliant minds, certainly, but their approach to medicine often seemed coldly analytical to human sensibilities. They saw patients as fascinating puzzles rather than suffering beings. "Fine," he conceded, "but I lead the trauma team." Maya nodded and left him to his thoughts. Quan turned back to the rusty landscape below. 10 years in Union service. And still, the sight of alien worlds stirred something in him. Wonder, perhaps. Or the reminder that humanity was just one small note in the universe's grand composition. A flicker of pain interrupted his contemplation. A tight, squeezing sensation in his chest that had been occurring with increasing frequency over the past few weeks. He pressed his hand against his sternum, breathing deeply until it subsided. Probably stress. Or perhaps the station's artificial gravity affecting his cardiovascular system. He'd run a self-diagnostic later, after the refugees were stabilized. The station's alert system pulsed, bathing the corridor in pulsating blue light. "Medical teams to docking bay," announced the AI's calm voice. "Refugee transport arriving ahead of schedule." Quan moved swiftly, medical instincts overriding exhaustion. The docking bay was already a chaotic scene when he arrived, stretchers hovering as they were guided by medical droids. The air filled with the sounds of pain in a dozen different languages. He spotted Saralia immediately, her 9-foot frame towering over the human medical staff, her skin glowing with an intense blue that reflected her heightened state of focus. "Major Le," she acknowledged with the formal bow of her species. "I have triaged the first wave, 3 requiring immediate surgical intervention." Her voice had the characteristic musical quality of the Syrian, each word precisely modulated, almost like notes on a scale. Quan scanned the incoming patients, medical implants behind his eyes, automatically assessing vital signs and categorizing injuries. Bay 3 for the Talaxian with chest trauma. Bay 1 for the human child. The Novan elder to Bay 4 with Dr. Truong. His gaze fell on a Union soldier, human, with extensive burns covering half his body. The man's vitals were failing rapidly. "And him?" Saralia inquired, her luminous eyes blinking their secondary lids, a sign of curiosity in her species. "With me in Bay 2, Quan decided. "Prepare for emergency reconstruction and synthetic skin grafting." The next hours passed in a blur of focused intensity. Quan moved from one surgery to the next, his hands steady, even as fatigue crept into his muscles. The station's medical facilities were state-of-the-art, equipped with regenerative technology and neural repair units that would have seemed miraculous only a century earlier. It was during the third consecutive operation that disaster struck. Quan was sealing a vascular tear in a young Proximan refugee when the station rocked violently. The lights flickered, and the medical AI's voice cut through the momentary darkness. Alert! Incoming projectile. Impact detected on medical deck. Emergency protocols engaged. Before Quan could react, a secondary explosion tore through the bulkhead beside him. He felt a searing pain as shrapnel sliced through his surgical gown and into his chest. The last thing he saw was a spray of his own blood arcing through the air as he collapsed. The universe faded to nothing. Consciousness returned in fragments. First came sensation, pain, sharp and insistent. Then sound, the high-pitched whine of medical equipment, voices speaking rapidly in multiple languages. Finally, sight, blurred shapes resolving into the pale green ceiling of an operating theater. Quan tried to move but found himself immobilized. Panic flared briefly until he recognized the familiar sensation of a medical stasis field. He was on an operating table. But why? Memory rushed back. The explosion, the shrapnel, the blood. He had become the patient. "The human is conscious," came Soralia's melodic voice from somewhere above him. Fascinating. The anesthetic should have suppressed awareness for another 4 hours. "Adjust the dosage," ordered another voice. Unfamiliar, with the clicking undertones of a species Quan couldn't immediately identify. "No," Soralia countered. "His consciousness may prove valuable. Major Le is a surgeon himself. His real-time feedback could be instructive." Quan tried to speak but found his vocal cords paralyzed by the stasis field. Only his eyes could move, and as they focused, he saw Soralia leaning over him, her skin pulsing with patterns of light that indicated intense concentration. "Major Le," she addressed him directly, "you have sustained severe trauma to your thoracic cavity. A metal fragment penetrated your chest wall and lodged near your heart. We are currently performing emergency surgery. You should not be conscious. But since you are, I will explain what we are doing." Quan blinked once, the only communication possible. "The fragment caused substantial damage to your pericardium and right atrium," Soralia continued, her long, six-fingered hands moving with precision above his chest. "We have repaired the primary injuries using regenerative nanites and tissue fusion. However," she paused, and her skin shifted to a pattern Quan had never seen before, ripples of purple and gold intermingling with her usual blue luminescence. "However," she continued, "during our examination, we discovered something anomalous." Panic surged through Quan again. As a doctor, he knew that anomalous was never a word you wanted to hear during your own surgery. "Your heart appears to contain an additional structure, a secondary mass of tissue that does not correspond to any known human cardiac formation." Quan's mind raced. A tumor? Heart disease? Some unknown pathogen he'd contracted from one of the countless alien species he'd treated? "I am currently examining this mass," Soralia explained, her hands moving again. "It appears to be organic in nature, but distinct from your normal cardiac tissue. It has its own rudimentary circulatory system that interfaces with yours." Quan felt a sharp sensation as Soralia manipulated something inside his chest. Then, abruptly, the pain vanished, not dulled or masked, but completely absent, as if a connection had been severed. "Interesting," Soralia murmured. "When I manipulate the mass, your pain response terminates. This suggests a neural connection between your central nervous system and this structure." Quan wanted to scream. Something was growing inside his heart, something with its own blood supply and neural connections, and Soralia was treating it like an interesting scientific curiosity, rather than a potentially life-threatening condition. "I propose we extract a tissue sample for genetic analysis," Saralia was saying to her assistant. "The cellular structure appears to have both human elements and—" Her voice trailed off, her skin pulsing rapidly with blues and greens, the Syrian equivalent of astonishment. "Major Le," she said, leaning closer to his face. "The mass in your heart appears to contain developing embryonic tissue." Embryonic? Kwan's thoughts spun wildly. How could an embryo be growing inside his heart? It was biologically impossible. "I believe we should complete a full genetic workup before proceeding," Saralia announced. "This discovery may represent an unprecedented xenobiological phenomenon. Major Lee's numerous interactions with diverse species may have triggered a unique form of biological adaptation." Through his panic, Kwan realized what was happening. He was becoming a research subject, a curiosity to be studied rather than a patient to be healed. He needed to communicate, to regain control of his own treatment. With enormous effort, he focused his will on his right hand, fighting against the stasis field's paralytic effect. A single finger twitched. Saralia noticed immediately. "The patient is attempting to communicate. Reduce stasis field intensity to permit limited motor function of the right arm." The paralyzing sensation ebbed from Kwan's right side, slowly, painfully. He raised his hand and made a writing gesture. "He wishes to write," Saralia observed. "Provide an interface." A holographic display appeared above Kwan's hand. With trembling fingers, he traced letters in the air. "Stop." Saralia's skin rippled with patterns of light. "You wish us to halt the procedure?" "Yes." "That would be inadvisable. The foreign mass—" My choice." Saralia blinked both sets of eyelids, a sign of consideration. "You wish to retain the anomalous growth despite potential risks?" "Yes, close me up." The alien doctor's skin darkened to a deep indigo. Frustration, perhaps, or disagreement. "As you wish, Major Le. We will complete the necessary repairs to your damaged tissues and cardiovascular system, but leave the anomalous mass intact. However, I must insist on continued monitoring." "Agreed." Saralia turned to her assistant. "Complete the primary repairs and close. Maintain minimal invasiveness around the secondary structure." As the surgical team worked to seal his chest, Kwan's mind raced with questions. What was growing inside him? How had it gotten there? Was it truly embryonic tissue, as Saralia suggested? And if so, what kind of life form was developing in symbiosis with his heart? The anesthetic finally claimed him, and darkness returned. Kwan awoke in the recovery ward, the familiar hum of monitoring equipment filling the silence. His chest ached with a deep, persistent pain, but his mind was remarkably clear. "Welcome back, Major." Maya Truong sat beside his bed, dark eyes studying him with professional concern. "You gave us quite a scare." "The explosion," Kwan began, his voice raspy from disuse. "The refugees—" "All stable," Maya assured him. "The attack was targeted at the station's communications array, not the medical deck. Your operating theater was just unfortunate collateral damage." Kwan nodded, then winced as the movement sent pain radiating through his chest. "And my surgery?" Maya's expression shifted subtly, a tightening around the eyes that Kwan recognized as medical hesitation. "The primary trauma was addressed successfully. Your heart and lung function have returned to near-normal parameters." "And the anomaly?" Kwan pressed. "Saralia found something." Maya glanced at the door before leaning closer. "Kwan, what she found is unprecedented. The tissue mass in your heart appears to be an embryonic life form, but unlike anything in the Union's xenobiological database." "How is that possible?" "We don't know. Saralia has some theories involving cross-species genetic transfer, possibly through your extended exposure to various alien physiologies. Your immune system should have rejected any foreign genetic material. But for some reason, it's not only tolerated this entity, but appears to be nourishing it. Quan placed a hand over his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath the bandages. Somewhere within that rhythm was another pulse, another life developing alongside his own. The thought should have terrified him, but instead, he felt an inexplicable sense of protectiveness. Soralia wants to continue studying it, Maya continued. She's already submitted a preliminary report to the Union Medical Council. They're very interested. I'm not a lab specimen, Quan said firmly. No, but you have to understand, this could represent an entirely new form of life, or a previously unknown method of reproduction. The scientific implications are enormous. Before Quan could respond, the door slid open, and Soralia entered. Her skin glowed with a calm blue light, but Quan detected undertones of excitement in the rapid pulses along her arms. Major Le, she greeted him. Your recovery progresses well. Your vital signs have stabilized, and cellular regeneration is proceeding at expected rates. And my passenger? Quan asked pointedly. Soralia's skin flickered with gold sparks. Surprise. An apt description. Yes, your passenger appears to be developing normally, though what constitutes normal for this entity remains to be determined. What exactly is it? Preliminary genetic analysis suggests it contains elements of human DNA, specifically your DNA, combined with genetic structures that bear similarities to several non-human species, primarily those indigenous to the Andromeda Quadrant. How did it get inside me? That remains unclear. One hypothesis involves microscopic genetic material transfer during your previous surgeries on Andromedan species. Your frequent work with open circulatory systems from multiple species created a unique opportunity for genetic exchange. Quan frowned. You're suggesting I was somehow impregnated during surgery? That terminology is imprecise, but not entirely inaccurate, Soralia replied. Though the process would have been entirely unconscious and molecular in nature, over time, these genetic materials may have found compatible structures within your cardiovascular system and begun developing into a new organism. The concept was simultaneously fascinating and disturbing. Quan had dedicated his life to healing beings from across the galaxy, and now, it seemed, his body had become host to an entirely new form of life, born from that work. What happens now? He asked. The Union Medical Council has requested your transfer to the Central Research Facility on Europa for comprehensive study, Soralia stated. They are particularly interested in the neural connection between you and the entity. During surgery, we observed that your pain receptors deactivated when the entity was disturbed, suggesting a protective mechanism. The thought of becoming a research subject made Quan's stomach clench. And if I refuse? Soralia's skin darkened. The Council has the authority to mandate medical quarantine in cases involving unknown xenobiological entities. Your situation qualifies. I'm a Union medical officer, Quan countered. I have rights, which may be temporarily suspended, given the unprecedented nature of this discovery. Soralia replied. Her tone remained neutral, but Quan detected an undertone of genuine excitement in the patterns of light across her skin. The entity within you represents a potentially revolutionary biological development, one that could advance our understanding of cross-species genetics by decades. Maya placed a restraining hand on Quan's arm as he attempted to sit up. What Soralia means, she interjected, is that the Council is eager to ensure both your health and the study of this phenomenon. Nothing has been decided yet. But Quan heard the unspoken message in her words. He was no longer just a doctor or even a patient. He had become a valuable scientific specimen, one the Union would not easily let go. I need time to think, he said finally. Of course, Soralia agreed. Rest is essential for your recovery. We will discuss further options tomorrow. After the doctors left, Quan lay in the dimmed light of the recovery room, one hand resting over his heart. He could feel it now, a subtle difference in his heartbeat, as though an echo followed each pulse. Not an arrhythmia, but a second, fainter beat intertwined with his own. "What are you?" he whispered to the presence inside him. No answer came, of course. But as he focused on the sensation, Quan experienced a sudden, fleeting emotion that seemed disconnected from his own thoughts. A feeling of warmth, of safety. It lasted only a moment before fading, leaving him wondering if he had imagined it. Sleep claimed him eventually, but his dreams were filled with strange visions. Translucent hearts beating within hearts, red deserts stretching endlessly beneath twin suns, and creatures with luminous skin swimming through the vastness of space. Quan spent the next 3 days under observation, subjected to a battery of tests. Blood samples, tissue scans, neural mapping. The medical team, now expanded to include specialists in xenobiology and developmental genetics, treated him with clinical detachment that grew increasingly frustrating. During a particularly invasive procedure involving a neural scanner, Quan felt a sharp pain in his chest, followed by that same peculiar sensation of emotional feedback. This time, a pulse of what felt distinctly like fear. The monitoring equipment immediately registered spikes in both his heart rate and in the electrical activity of the entity within him. "Fascinating," murmured the technician, a centaurian with 6 eyes that all widened in scientific delight. "The entity appears to be responding to your distress, or perhaps causing it." "It's afraid," Quan said, with a certainty he couldn't explain. The technician made a notation. "Anthropomorphizing the organism is natural, but scientifically unsound. Major, it lacks a developed neural system capable of emotional response." But Quan knew what he had felt. The presence in his heart wasn't just tissue and cells. It was becoming something more, something conscious, something capable of feeling. That night, alone in his room, Quan made his decision. He would not allow himself, or the entity within him, to become permanent research subjects. He had spent his career preserving life and dignity. He wouldn't abandon those principles now. The station's night cycle provided cover for his plan. As a senior medical officer, Quan still had access to most areas, though his movements were flagged for monitoring. He disabled the medical trackers embedded in his forearm and made his way to the station's lower levels, where the maintenance crews and support staff lived. He found Jackson Lee in the engineer's mess hall, nursing a cup of synthetic coffee and studying technical schematics. The security officer looked up in surprise as Quan slid into the seat opposite him. "Major Le, should you be out of medical?" "Probably not," Quan admitted. "But I need your help, Jax." They had served together on 3 different postings, and Lee had once been a patient under Quan's care, after a particularly vicious encounter with separatist forces. The security officer studied Quan's face, then nodded once. "What do you need?" "Away off the station, quietly." Lee whistled softly. "Running from medical command? That's not like you, Quan." "It's complicated." "It's about what they found inside you, isn't it?" At Quan's startled expression, Lee shrugged. "Station this size. Word travels. Especially word that's strange." Quan leaned forward. "They want to turn me into a laboratory specimen, study me, and—" He hesitated, then decided on honesty. "And the life form growing inside me." "Life form?" Lee echoed, eyebrows rising. The rumor was some kind of tumor. "It's more than that. It's—" Quan struggled to find the words. "It's alive, conscious, even. I can feel it responding to me, to my emotions." Lee's expression was skeptical, but his voice remained supportive. "And you want to protect it?" "Yes." "Why?" The question caught Quan off guard. Why was he risking his career, possibly his freedom, for an unknown entity that had somehow taken root in his heart. The rational part of his mind recognized the scientific importance of studying such a phenomenon. As a doctor, he should support the research. But there was that feeling again, not his own emotion, but a sensation of trust emanating from somewhere within his chest, a presence reaching out to him. "Because it's innocent," he finally answered. "And because, somehow, it trusts me to keep it safe." Lee studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Supply transport leaves for the surface mining operation at 0400. I can get you aboard as medical personnel conducting a routine health inspection. From there, you're on your own." The surface? Quan hadn't expected that. Arcanus was largely uninhabited, a desert world valuable only for its mineral deposits. The few settlements were isolated mining operations scattered across the red wastelands. "It's your best chance," Lee insisted. "The Union will expect you to try for an off-world transport. The surface gives you time to disappear." Quan nodded slowly. "Thank you, Jax." "Don't thank me yet," the security officer replied grimly. "Arcanus is a death trap for the unprepared. The mining outpost has basic supplies. But beyond that," he shrugged. "Let's just say there's a reason the native population died out millennia ago." 4 hours later, disguised in the environmental suit of a medical inspector, Quan boarded the supply transport bound for Arcanus. The craft was little more than a cargo hauler with minimal life support, a far cry from the sophisticated medical transports he was accustomed to. As the transport detached from the station and began its descent through Arcanus's thin atmosphere, Quan felt a flutter of anxiety that wasn't entirely his own. The entity within him seemed to sense the danger, the uncertainty of their path. "It's all right," he whispered, one hand pressed against his chest. "We'll be safe." The words were as much to reassure himself as his internal companion. Beyond the transport's viewport, the red landscape of Arcanus grew steadily larger, a world of dust and wind, of ancient, eroded mountains and vast, empty plains. Somewhere down there, Quan would need to find a way to survive while evading the Union authorities, who would inevitably come looking for him. More importantly, he needed to understand what was growing inside him, and what it might eventually become. The mining outpost was a collection of prefabricated structures huddled against the base of a rust-colored cliff. Protective shields hummed around the perimeter, keeping the worst of Arcanus's abrasive dust storms at bay. The transport landed with a jarring thud on the designated pad, and Quan disembarked with the inspection team, careful to keep his face shield lowered. His medical credentials passed the cursory security check at the outpost entrance. The inspector he was impersonating wasn't due for another 3 standard weeks, giving him some time before the deception would be discovered. Still, Quan knew he couldn't remain here long. The outpost's medical facility was rudimentary, a single room with basic diagnostic equipment and a limited pharmacy. Enough to treat minor injuries and common illnesses among the mining crew, but nothing that would help Quan examine the entity within his heart. He used his access to download what information he could from the outpost's communications array. News from the station confirmed his fears. An all-points alert had been issued for him, citing critical medical condition and potential biohazard as reasons for his immediate apprehension. They were painting him as a threat, possibly contagious, definitely dangerous. It was a clever strategy. Even those who might otherwise help him would think twice if they believed he carried some unknown pathogen. Quan had been on Arcanus for 3 days, carefully avoiding the few security cameras in the outpost and planning his next move. When disaster struck, he was in his small assigned quarters when the door slid open without warning. Standing in the corridor was Seralia, her tall frame unmistakable, even in the environmental suit adapted for her species. "Major Le," she said, her voice carrying that musical quality even through the suit's communication system. "You have led us on quite a pursuit." Quan backed away, looking frantically for an escape route. There was none. The quarters had a single entrance, now blocked by the alien doctor. How did you find me? The entity within you emits a unique radiation signature, Soralia explained. Subtle, but detectable with the right equipment. Once we understood what to look for, tracking you was simply a matter of scanning the outposts. I won't go back, Quan stated firmly. Not to be dissected and studied. Your reaction is understandable but unnecessary, Soralia replied, stepping into the room and allowing the door to close behind her. I have come alone. Quan frowned. The Union Medical Council believes I am conducting preliminary tests at the northern mining facility, she finished. They do not know I have located you yet. Why would you lie to them? Soralia's skin pulsed with patterns of light, visible even through her environmental suit. Because I have continued analyzing the genetic samples we took during your surgery, and what I discovered. She paused, the lights across her skin shifting to deep purple. What I discovered changes everything. Despite his suspicion, Quan felt a surge of curiosity. What did you find? The entity is not merely a random combination of genetic material, Soralia explained. Its development appears purposeful, directed. It is creating specialized cells that produce compounds I have never seen before. Compounds that interact with human physiology in remarkable ways. What kinds of compounds? Preliminary tests suggest they may have regenerative properties far beyond our current medical capabilities. The entity appears to be developing as a symbiotic organism, one that could potentially repair damaged tissue, neutralize pathogens, even reverse cellular aging. Quan placed a hand over his heart, feeling the now familiar double beat. You're saying it's beneficial? Potentially revolutionary, Soralia corrected. If the development continues as projected, this organism could represent the most significant medical advancement since cellular reconstruction technology. Her skin pulsed with excitement. And it chose you, Major Liu, not randomly. Your genetic markers show compatibility factors that would be extremely rare. So what now? Quan asked cautiously. You want to take me back to be studied? No, Soralia surprised him by saying, I want to help you understand what is growing inside you, and to protect it from those who would exploit it without consideration for its developing consciousness. You believe it's conscious? The neural patterns we detected during your surgery were rudimentary, but unmistakable. This is not merely tissue growth. It is the development of a sentient being, one with a unique connection to you. She tilted her head, the gesture oddly human despite her alien physiology. You have felt it, have you not? Emotional impressions? Sensations that are not your own? Quan nodded slowly. Yes. Then, you understand why this discovery must be protected. Studied carefully. Not dissected and analyzed like a laboratory specimen. Soralia's skin rippled with determination. The Union Medical Council would not understand. They would see only the potential applications, not the emerging consciousness. For the first time since awakening from surgery, Quan felt a sense of hope. What do you propose? There is an abandoned research facility in the southern hemisphere, Soralia explained. Established during the initial exploration of Arcanis, before the mining operations began. It contains medical equipment more sophisticated than what you'll find here, enough for us to monitor the entity's development safely. Us? I will assist you, Soralia confirmed. My research leave extends for another 30 days. By then, we should know more about the entity's nature and purpose. Quan considered her offer. He had no reason to trust Soralia beyond her word. Yet something, perhaps the entity itself, urged him to accept her help. All right, he decided. But we do this my way. No invasive procedures without my consent. This isn't just about scientific discovery. It's about protecting a new form of life. Soralia's skin glowed with a warm golden light, the Syrian expression of agreement. Your terms are acceptable. We leave at nightfall, when the dust storms typically abate. As they prepared for the journey across Arcanus's treacherous surface, Quan felt the entity within him respond with what seemed like anticipation. It was growing stronger, its presence in his mind more distinct. No longer just impressions of emotion, but something approaching thoughts, fragmented and alien, but unmistakably conscious. They were no longer just doctor and patient, human and alien, but something more complex. Three beings from different worlds, united in a journey whose destination none of them could predict. The journey across Arcanus's surface was harrowing. They traveled in a modified terrain vehicle requisitioned from the mining outpost, its environmental shields constantly strained by the planet's harsh conditions. Dust storms rose without warning, turning day to night and forcing them to stop for hours at a time, waiting for visibility to return. During these pauses, Quan and Seralia talked. Despite his initial distrust, Quan found the alien doctor to be a thoughtful companion. Her perspective on medicine differed from human approaches, more holistic, concerned with patterns and connections rather than isolated symptoms. "Your species tends to see the body as a machine," she observed during one particularly long delay. "Parts to be repaired or replaced. Mine sees it as an ecosystem, each element affecting all others in complex ways." "And yet we're both doctors," Quan pointed out. "Both dedicated to healing." "Yes," Seralia agreed, her skin pulsing with gentle blue light. "The destination is the same, though our paths differ." They reached the abandoned research facility on the fifth day. It stood alone amid a vast red plain, its once white structures stained the color of rust by years of exposure to Arcanus's abrasive atmosphere. Solar panels, remarkably still functional, provided minimal power to the environmental systems, keeping the interior habitable, if not comfortable. The medical laboratory was surprisingly well preserved. Dust covered everything, but the equipment, designed to withstand harsh conditions, remained largely operational after Seralia's skilled recalibrations. "This imaging unit is actually superior to what we had on the station," she noted as she activated a molecular scanner. It was designed for detailed study of Arcanus's indigenous microorganisms before they were declared extinct. Quan lay on the examination platform, trying to relax as the scanner hummed to life above him. "Will it hurt the entity?" "No," Seralia assured him. "It uses quantum resonance to map molecular structures without disruption. The entity will not even detect the scan." The images that appeared on the laboratory's holographic display took Quan's breath away. There, nestled alongside his human heart, was a structure unlike anything he had ever seen. Neither fully organic nor inorganic, but something in between. It pulsed with its own rhythm, synchronized yet distinct from his heartbeat. Tendrils of specialized tissue extended from it, interfacing with his cardiovascular system in complex ways. "It's beautiful," he whispered, unable to take his eyes from the display. "Yes," Seralia agreed, her skin glowing with scientific appreciation. "And far more developed than our last scan. The rate of growth has accelerated." "Is that dangerous?" "Not necessarily. It appears to be drawing minimal resources from your system, less than a human fetus would require from its mother. And these structures here," she indicated filaments extending toward Quan's liver, "appear to be filtering toxins from your bloodstream, actually improving your overall health." Quan studied the image, medical training momentarily overriding personal involvement. "The neural connections are extensive." "Indeed. They follow your parasympathetic nervous system, with particular concentration around the vagus nerve. That would explain the emotional feedback you've experienced. The entity is quite literally connected to your emotional processing centers." For the next 2 weeks, they established a routine. Each morning, Seralia would conduct non-invasive scans to monitor the entity's development. The afternoons were spent analyzing the data and theorizing about the organism's nature and purpose. In the evenings, they would take turns venturing outside the facility to check the perimeter and observe Arcanus's spectacular sunsets. 3 suns descending in sequence, painting the sky in bands of crimson, amber, and deep purple. During this time, Quan's connection with the entity grew stronger. What had begun as vague emotional impressions developed into more structured communication. Not words, exactly, but clear concepts and intentions that he somehow understood. The entity was curious. It was learning from him, absorbing not just biological data but memories, emotions, even ideas. It communicated through images and sensations rather than language, showing Quan visions of stars and distant worlds, of cells dividing and reforming in endless patterns of creation. "It's trying to tell me something," Quan explained to Soralia after a particularly vivid episode. "About where it comes from. I think I saw a system with 3 stars, like Arcanus. But the planets were different, oceans, not deserts." Soralia recorded his description, her skin pulsing with excitement. The Andromedan Quadrant contains several trinary star systems with oceanic worlds. Perhaps that is its origin. But how did genetic material from there end up inside me? Perhaps you encountered a carrier, a patient who had visited such worlds. Soralia's expression turned thoughtful, her skin dimming to a contemplative blue. Or perhaps the entity itself guided its creation, drawing compatible genetic material together to form a new whole. The idea was simultaneously fascinating and unsettling. Had this being somehow engineered its own birth inside Quan's heart? And if so, to what purpose? On the 17th day, everything changed. Quan awoke in the night, heart racing, sweat soaking his sleeping clothes. The entity was broadcasting intense emotion, not fear this time, but urgency. A need to communicate something of vital importance. Images flooded his mind. The research facility viewed from above. Union ships descending, armed figures in environmental suits breaching the perimeter. "They're coming," he gasped, staggering to Soralia's quarters. "The Union! They found us!" The alien doctor rose immediately, her skin pulsing with alarm. "How do you know?" "The entity showed me." Quan pressed a hand to his chest, feeling the rapid double beat. It can sense them somehow, their approach, their intentions. Soralia moved to the facility's rudimentary sensor array, activating the long-range scanners. For a moment, the screen showed only the empty Arcani sky. But then, faint signatures, approaching from the north. 3 ships, military configuration, on direct course for the research facility. They must have tracked the energy surge when we activated the medical equipment, Soralia reasoned, her normally melodic voice tight with concern. "We have perhaps 2 hours before they arrive." "We need to run," Quan insisted. Soralia's skin darkened to a deep indigo. "Where?" "This planet offers few hiding places, and our vehicle lacks the range to reach another outpost before they overtake us." Quan felt the entity's response, not panic, but determination. More images filled his mind. The medical laboratory, the scanner, a procedure he didn't recognize. "It wants us to do something," he said slowly. "Something with the medical equipment, before they arrive." "What?" "I don't know exactly, but—" Quan closed his eyes, focusing on the entity's communication. "It involves the molecular scanner and something surgical." Soralia's secondary eyelids blinked rapidly, a sign of intense thought. "Perhaps it wishes to accelerate its development. The scanner could be reconfigured to emit specific frequencies that might catalyze cellular processes." The suggestion aligned with the images Quan was receiving. "Yes, I think that's it. It wants to grow, to develop further before the Union arrives." "That could be dangerous," Soralia warned. "Accelerated development might strain your cardiovascular system." Quan nodded grimly. "I know, but I think it's our only chance." They worked quickly, Soralia's expertise with the equipment complementing Quan's medical knowledge. They reconfigured the molecular scanner to emit targeted quantum pulses that, in theory, would accelerate the entity's cellular development without damaging Quan's own tissues. "This is highly experimental," Soralia cautioned as Quan positioned himself beneath the scanner. "The risk is necessary," Quan finished. "I trust it. Whatever it is, whatever it's becoming, it doesn't want to harm me." The procedure was painful, far more than Quan had anticipated. As the scanner activated, he felt a burning sensation spread from his heart throughout his body. The entity's presence in his mind intensified, becoming almost overwhelming in its complexity. Visions cascaded through his consciousness, evolutionary cycles spanning millions of years, civilizations rising and falling among the stars, genetic codes unspooling like cosmic ribbons. Through it all ran a consistent theme: symbiosis, cooperation, different life forms joining together to create something greater than either could become alone. "It's people!" Quan gasped, fighting to maintain consciousness as the procedure continued. They evolved as symbiotic organisms, joining with hosts to create new forms of life. Not parasites, partners. Soralia monitored the readings, her skin fluctuating between concern and scientific fascination. The entity's mass is increasing rapidly, but it's not invading your tissues. It's restructuring itself, becoming more defined. The scanner completed its cycle, powering down with a descending hum. Quan lay still, breathing heavily, adjusting to the new sensation within his chest. The entity now felt distinctly separate from him, yet more deeply connected than ever, a paradox he couldn't fully articulate. "How do you feel?" Soralia asked, helping him sit up. "Different," Quan replied. "Stronger, somehow. And the entity, it's more awake now, more present." Soralia conducted a quick scan. Its neural structure has increased in complexity by approximately 300%. It appears to have developed structures analogous to a primitive brain. Before they could discuss further, the facility's perimeter alarm sounded, a shrill, insistent wailing that echoed through the abandoned corridors. "They're here," Quan said, rising unsteadily to his feet. "Earlier than we expected." "We must hide," Soralia urged, gathering their essential equipment. But Quan shook his head, a strange calm settling over him. "No, no more running. Major Le, they will take you into custody. Study the entity without concern for its developing consciousness." "I know." Quan placed a hand over his heart, feeling the strong double pulse. "But I've realized something. This entity, this life form, didn't choose me by accident. It needs to be understood, not just by us, but by others. It wants to communicate, to connect." Soralia's skin pulsed with confusion. "You intend to surrender?" "I intend to negotiate," Quan corrected. "To help them understand what's happening. This isn't just about me, or even this one entity. It's about a new kind of relationship between species, something that could change medicine, change how we think about life itself." The sound of the Union ships landing outside reverberated through the facility. Soon, they would breach the entrance. "Will you help me?" Quan asked Soralia. The alien doctor studied him, her luminous eyes unblinking. Finally, her skin glowed with a warm, golden light. Agreement, perhaps even respect. "I will advocate for you, and for the entity," she promised. "My reputation in xenobiology may carry some weight with the Council." When the Union security team breached the facility's main entrance, they found Quan and Soralia waiting calmly in the central laboratory. The armed officers surrounded them, weapons raised, while a medical team in containment suits hovered nervously behind. Dr. Maya Truong pushed forward through the security cordon, her expression a mixture of relief and professional concern. "Major Le," she began formally, "by order of the Union Medical Council, you are to be placed under quarantine and transported to the research facility on Europa for examination and treatment." Quan stood tall, meeting her gaze directly. I request an emergency hearing with the council before any action is taken. That's not protocol for... Maya, Quan interrupted, his voice quiet but firm. What's growing inside me isn't a parasite or a tumor. It's a sentient being, one with the potential to revolutionize medicine across the Union. At least, give us the chance to explain. Maya hesitated, glancing at Saralia. Dr. Saralia, your assessment? Major Le speaks the truth, Saralia confirmed, her skin pulsing with patterns that communicated scientific certainty to those of her species who were present. The entity is developing consciousness and appears to be symbiotic in nature, not parasitic. Preliminary analysis suggests it produces compounds with extraordinary medical applications. A tense silence filled the laboratory as Maya considered their words. Finally, she nodded. I'll arrange a remote hearing with the council. Until then, you'll remain under observation aboard the medical transport. It was a small victory, but significant. As the security team escorted them from the facility, Quan felt the entity's response, approval, and something like hope. The Union medical transport was essentially a flying hospital, equipped with isolation chambers and sophisticated diagnostic equipment. Quan was placed in a secure medical bay, monitored constantly by both human and AI systems. Saralia was allowed to continue her observations under Maya's supervision, though her access to equipment was limited. 3 days into the journey back to the Union's central medical facility, the council convened an emergency hearing. The chamber aboard the transport was transformed into a makeshift courtroom, with holographic projections of the 12 council members arranged in a semicircle. Their faces, human and alien alike, showed varying degrees of skepticism and scientific curiosity. Major Le, began the council chair, an elderly Terran woman with steel-gray hair and piercing eyes. You stand accused of violating quarantine protocols, endangering Union personnel, and interfering with critical medical research. How do you plead? I acted to protect a new form of life, Quan replied steadily. One developing within me, but separate from me, a sentient being with its own rights to existence. Murmurs rippled through the council. The chair raised a hand for silence. Dr. Saralia, as the primary xenobiologist involved, what evidence supports Major Lu's claim of sentience? Saralia stepped forward, her skin glowing with formal patterns of scientific address. The entity displays organized neural activity, consistent with developing consciousness. It communicates through a direct neural interface with Major Lu, sharing complex concepts and memories. Most significantly, it has demonstrated purposeful adaptation of its own genetic structure to enhance compatibility with human physiology. Could these phenomena be explained by more mundane biological processes? Asked a Novan Council member, his crystalline features refracting the chamber's light. Parasite manipulation of host behavior is well documented. The entity does not manipulate, Quan interjected. It communicates, collaborates. I remain fully autonomous in my thoughts and actions. Yet you risked your career, your freedom, to protect it, observed another council member. Some might see that as evidence of influence. Quan shook his head. I made a medical and ethical judgment, as I have done throughout my career. This entity represents not just a new life form, but a new relationship between species, a symbiotic partnership with profound implications for medicine. Elaborate on these implications, requested the chair. Saralia activated a holographic display showing molecular structures. The entity produces compounds that enhance cellular regeneration, strengthen immune response, and potentially extend cellular longevity. These compounds are specifically tailored to human physiology, designed, it seems, to benefit the host. And what does the entity gain from this arrangement? Asked a Syrian council member, her skin patterns indicating deep skepticism. A safe environment to develop, Quan answered. Nutrients, protection, and perhaps something less tangible, a sharing of experience, of consciousness itself. The questioning continued for hours. probing every aspect of Quan's experience and Soralia's findings. Throughout, Quan felt the entity's presence in his mind, calm, attentive, occasionally offering impressions or memories that helped him formulate responses. Finally, the chair called for deliberation. As the council's holograms flickered into private conference mode, Maya approached Quan. "You've given them a lot to consider," she said quietly. "But the Union has protocols for a reason. Quan, unknown biological entities." "This isn't unknown anymore," he countered. "We've been studying it for weeks. It's not harmful, it's beneficial. To you, perhaps. But what about others? What if this is just the first stage of something more invasive? The Council has to consider the broader implications." Before Quan could respond, he felt a sudden shift within, the entity becoming more active, more insistent in its communication. Images flooded his mind, cellular structures, genetic sequences, a process of transformation. "It's trying to tell me something," he gasped, pressing a hand to his chest. "Something important." Soralia moved closer, scanner in hand. "Your vital signs are elevating. The entity's activity has increased dramatically." More images came. Faster now. Union medical facilities. Patients with various ailments. The entity's compounds healing them. But not one entity, many. Each slightly different. Each adapted to a specific host. "It's not just about this one life form," Quan realized, speaking his thoughts aloud. "It's about potential. Its species reproduces through symbiosis, creating new generations that enhance the lives of their hosts. Not invasion, not control, but mutual benefit." The Council's holograms reactivated, faces grave as they registered the commotion. The chair addressed him. "Are you experiencing difficulty?" "No," Quan assured her, straightening. "Communication. The entity is showing me its purpose, what it hopes to become." "And what is that purpose?" asked the Novan counselor. Quan met the alien's crystalline gaze steadily. "To heal. To improve life. Not just for itself, but for others. Its species evolved as symbiotic partners to other life forms, enhancing their abilities while gaining a safe haven to develop. What's growing inside me could be the first of a new generation, one that could transform medicine throughout the Union." Skepticism remained on many council faces, but Quan sensed a shift in the chamber's atmosphere, curiosity beginning to outweigh caution. "We will require extensive testing under controlled conditions," the chair stated, "to verify these claims and assess any potential risks." "I understand," Quan agreed. "But I ask that the entity be recognized as a sentient being with rights, not merely as a specimen for study, and that I remain its primary host and advocate." The council conferred briefly before the chair spoke again. "We will establish a special research protocol. You will be transferred to the Union Medical Research Facility on Europa, where both you and the entity will be studied under conditions that respect potential sentience while ensuring Union security." It wasn't complete victory, but it was a beginning. Recognition that what grew within Quan's heart was more than a biological curiosity. As the hearing concluded, Quan felt the entity's response: satisfaction, gratitude, and something that felt remarkably like hope. The following months brought profound changes, both to Quan and to Union medicine. Under the supervision of a specially appointed research team, the entity continued to develop, its neural complexity increasing until direct communication became possible. Not just with Quan, but eventually with others through specialized interfaces. They named it Arca, after the planet where its true development had begun. Through careful study and communication, Union scientists began to understand its nature. Arca's species had evolved in the distant reaches of the Andromeda Galaxy, developing the ability to combine genetic material from compatible hosts to create new, symbiotic life forms that benefited both parties. The medical applications were revolutionary. Compounds produced by Arca could accelerate healing, fight infections resistant to conventional treatments, and even repair neural damage previously considered permanent. More importantly, as ARCA matured, it developed the ability to produce genetic templates that could be used to create offspring, each designed to partner with a specific host species and address particular medical needs. Quan remained ARCA's primary host and advocate, his body adapting to the symbiotic relationship in ways that enhanced his own health and extended his capabilities. The neural connection between them deepened, allowing a form of communication that transcended conventional language, a sharing of thoughts, memories, and perceptions that enriched them both. Soralia continued her research alongside them, her groundbreaking papers on symbiotic xenobiology earning her recognition throughout the scientific community. The prejudice that had initially met their discovery gradually gave way to cautious acceptance, then to enthusiasm, as the medical benefits became impossible to ignore. 1 year after the discovery of ARCA, Quan stood at a viewport on the Europa Research Facility, gazing out at the stars. He felt ARCA's presence within him, no longer just in his heart, but throughout his body, integrated with his systems, while maintaining its distinct consciousness. "What do you see when you look at the stars?" he asked silently, directing the thought along their shared neural pathway. The answer came not in words, but in images. Countless worlds, spinning through the void. Life in infinite variations. Connections forming, and breaking, and reforming across the vastness of space. Potential. Possibility. The endless dance of creation. Quan smiled, placing a hand over his heart, the heart they now shared. "I see it too," he whispered. "The future. Our future." In the sterile corridors of the research facility, human doctors worked alongside alien colleagues, studying the symbiotic relationships that ARCA's offspring had begun to form with carefully selected hosts. Each partnership was unique, tailored to the needs and capabilities of both beings involved. Each represented a new chapter in the story of life in the galaxy, a story of cooperation rather than competition, of boundaries transcended rather than enforced. And at the center of it all was the unlikely partnership that had started it all. A human doctor with a compassionate heart, and the alien life form that had chosen to grow within it, separate yet together, distinct yet united. Two beings from different worlds creating something greater than either could have become alone. As new symbiotic partnerships formed throughout the Union, as ancient prejudices gave way to new understanding, as the definition of life itself expanded to encompass these unique relationships. Quan and ARCA continued their journey together, explorers on the frontier of a new kind of existence, pioneers of a future where the boundaries between species dissolved in the light of shared consciousness and mutual growth. The alien doctor had cut him open and found a baby growing in his heart. But what had begun as a medical anomaly had become a revolution, a transformation not just of bodies, but of minds, of societies, of the very concept of what it meant to be alive in a universe filled with endless possibilities for connection.